Man, this review is late, but better late than never, I suppose. Let's get this over with. Welcome to appabend's Uncapped, a series of reviews by yours truly. Today's review is going to be on Code Vein, the Souls-like JRPG by Bandai Namco. Before we get to this review, YouTube might potentially demonetize this video because it has them anime tata, so if you'd like to support my work, you can do so by checking the links down below. Also, huge thanks to Malik for the pledge on Patreon. You are fantastic. Code Vein is the story of you as a nameless protagonist who is a revenant of this desolate world. At this point, the story becomes a bit complicating with a lot of terms that I'm not too sure when to use, but the most basic form of the story is you as the protagonist have the ability to save the world because you can do certain things that other revenants can't do because if they do it, they get frenzied or something. So it's up to you and your new friends to use your abilities and figure out how to save this post-apocalyptic world while learning the backstory and the intrigues that make it. Code Vein is an attempt from Bandai Namco to jump into the Souls-like genre. So to distinguish itself from the Souls games, what Bandai Namco did is to have an action RPG with a Souls-like gameplay, except the characters are anime, and they wear masks that would make them look like they're a Tokyo Ghoul character. And since the characters have a more anime aesthetic, naturally the character creation is going to be more anime focused. So this is an opportunity where you can create your own waifus or husbandos in the game. And wow, this game nailed it. Code Vein has one of the best anime character creations that I have ever seen in any video game. If you're playing this game purely for the anime character creation, then you'll definitely get your money's worth. You can make your waifus and husbandos to whatever designs you like. I do want a little bit more variety in the clothes, but the facial features, the hairstyles, they're all incredibly robust, and you can access this feature at any time at any point in the home base. Thankfully, the game doesn't disappoint on the pretty anime boys and girls department. I do want a little bit more boys, but the girls here are really well designed and might cater to a lot of your tastes. Not only that, but if you're willing to just take a break out of the intense fighting, you can also just visit the hot spring, which actually serves not just as a little bit of fan service, but can be used as a way to recover half of your souls, or haze as the game likes to call them. And it's not just on the character side, the game's environments as well look pretty stunning. They also vary from places to places, albeit they can be rather cliched. You got your city ruins early on, but as you get through the game, you will meet up places like around the cliffside, the snowy mountains, and even the desert area. And since this is a Souls game, of course you get your really complicated cathedral with tons of traps and pitfalls that would just annoy the living hell out of you. What didn't impress me so much was the enemy designs. Now initially they're fine, they're just a bunch of knights mixed in with what appears to be your mom, but unfortunately once you're halfway through the game, you've pretty much seen all the enemies because they're going to be reused again in the next half, except this time they have a different skin and they're slightly stronger, and that totally makes it better, right? Not really, because as you get through the game, you will notice these designs being recycled and you're just gonna get tired of facing the same basic enemies over and over again. I particularly hate those spiky blobs. I thought I'm not gonna find those things again later on, but cue the desert area and they're 10 times more annoying there. Thankfully, the bosses in particular are very well designed. I particularly really like the feminine looking bosses because they have certain visual perks that come with them, and that's a solid bonus for this game. Even if you couldn't make sense of what's going on or why they have those designs, doesn't really matter. They have perks and they have very good perks. The rest of the bosses are also really nice, but one of them, or more accurately two of them, reminds me of a certain Dark Souls boss battle. And this brings us to the actual gameplay of this Souls-like game. Can Bandai Namco truly deliver the notoriously difficult but really satisfying and awesome gameplay of the Souls games? Kind of. While the core aspect of a Souls game is there, well, bear with me here. Either I'm really getting better at video games, or this game is not that hard. Not that this game isn't challenging or anything, it's just that for a Souls game, it's definitely an easy one. It's a game that provides a more laid-back and relaxing Souls experience, and saying that makes about as much sense as a more laid-back and relaxing Lego stepping experience. There are some bosses in the game that I've beaten on the first try. Sure, there are some that are pretty hard and require requires a lot of retries, but when there are bosses that I can just breeze through with ease, it kind of cheapens the hardcore Souls experience. I mostly die on boss battles, but the few times I die outside of boss battles is thanks to me falling down into the abyss or being hounded by so many enemies that you just can't process them one by one. Is it because you have an AI companion that the game becomes easy? Maybe in some cases, but for the most part, while they are certainly pretty helpful, there are some boss battles that are still pretty tough, even with them. If only they can shut their freaking mouths. Your companions will make comments throughout the road that just annoy the living hell out of you. The worst part is when you die and you respawn in a nearby checkpoint and they're gonna be like, "Good morning, sunshine," or, "Oh, you're back." No, girl, you're back after you got killed early on and left me to fight the enemy by myself. Why can't the respawn dialogues acknowledge that both parties get killed? For the most part, the AI pretends as if you're the only person who got resurrected, the arrogant freaking D-bags. But you know what? As annoying as they are, I think they're the reason why the game is a breeze to get through. So if you seriously want to challenge yourself, there's nothing wrong with wandering around the complex by your lonesome. At least you won't get smugly called out for dying all the freaking time. However, the companions do have the ability to resurrect you if you die by giving half of their health. You in turn also have the ability to do so to your companions if they die. So maybe the true Souls experience lies when you try to get through the game by your lonesome. But before you do that, there are some changes that you need to be aware of. The one thing I find a bit of a mixed bag is the game's parry system. Depending on the armor that you use or the blood veil that you use, the game's parry system can be very easy or very difficult because there's a delay between you pressing the parry button and the character actually doing the parry. When you want to parry an opponent, your character needs to flash bright white while the opponent hits you just as you flash bright. That's how you do the parry. And unfortunately, it doesn't work too well. Thankfully, while blocking enemies introduce chip damage, it is at least miles better than being hit. You can also dodge enemy attacks just right when they do it, so your reflexes aren't wasted in that area. In fact, I'd recommend dodging and blocking in general for your defensive maneuvers instead of parrying. Another problem with the game is that the healing items suck. Your primary means of healing is the regen, and they only heal your health the same way drinking a glass of water from a shot glass is quenching your thirst after a 1-hour workout. You really need to find regen upgrades for your health as soon as possible because you're going to be running out of them and there are no other ways for you to get healing items. Even after getting the regen upgrade that increases the amount of regen you get, they still heal very badly. What's worse is that your character's animation only supports one regen healing as opposed to the Souls games where you can drink more than one in one animation. But these are just nitpicks. The overall Souls-like gameplay for Code Vein is pretty solid, if a bit flawed. While it is one of the easier Souls games out there, it's not by a huge amount. You'll still feel that the game is challenging enough for you to get through, even with an AI companion. The game allows for many different types of playstyles. I myself really like to use the sway hander and its ridiculously powerful thrust attacks, but do keep in mind about your weight as your dodges won't be useful if you're over encumbered, just like the Souls games. Now let's talk about that complicating story. The anime Dark Souls game unfortunately didn't impress me that much in this department. It's not that the story is bad, it's just that it's poorly told, like a nice little drawing being ripped apart and forcefully stitched together. I see a lot of potential in the game's story, especially with the amount of characters that this game has and the game's dedication in presenting the backstories of those characters. It's just that the game throws all of these stories at you and expect you to piece them all together. For one, I really like the characters. Even if they're just revenants, they still have humanity in them that makes them interesting. It's just that they have a Persona 5 problem in that their role gets diminished into side characters at best and extras at worst the moment their storyline is over, which means that they got very little development. Sometimes their development is totally optional. Through their remains or blood vestiges, you're able to briefly glance on their past. Initially, I really like the presentation of these backstories. They're sad, gloomy, and reveals quite a lot of details, but when you got bombarded by it almost every hour, it becomes tedious and you ended up not feeling sympathetic philosophy with the characters. You just want to end the backstory sessions as soon as possible so that you can get into the next level. This game is a prime example in how bad presentation can totally ruin a story's emotional impact and the overall world building. One of the biggest issue on the story presentation is that the story is more about the world that the characters live in instead of the characters living the world. What I mean by that is it's more focused on explaining how the world works rather than having those characters to experience the world just as we experience the world, which means that the characters are going to be used as expositions rather than actual characters that we can relate to. Code Vein uses their characters to tell the players about the world rather than using those characters as a surrogate to learn more about the world as they go forward. They only become a surrogate later on when new information about the world pops in, but those information would only make sense if you pay attention to what the character has been talking about in the past couple of hours. Unfortunately, the presentation of the information is so boring that I don't blame you if you don't pay attention. And even if the story is well presented, the best thing I can say about it is that it's an okay shonen anime, and I say shonen because despite having tons of gore and blood, the game's overall story relies on that power of friendship cliche that shonen animes are notorious for having. It's definitely far from the worst story that I've seen because I legitimately feel emotions towards a couple of moments, and that's the best thing that I can say about the story as a whole. It has its moments, but nothing impressive. It has a potential to grow, but in reality, it's too jumbled to be emotionally impactful. And now let's talk about performance. I played this game on two PCs, but I played it mostly on my old GTX 1050 laptop. For that laptop, I can run the game on 1080p and achieve 40 to 50 FPS at high settings, but I decided to lower it down to 720p high to get that 60 FPS. As for my brand new GTX 1660 Ti laptop, the game runs it at 1080p 60 FPS Ultra with no problems whatsoever. There are a couple of hiccups during the level transitions, but overall, it's a very well optimized game with tons of different options for you to choose. Overall, Code Vein is good. Not great, just good. It's a game that has a lot of really cool aspects in it, but it's not entirely satisfactory on others. The excellent anime character creation mode, the gorgeous character designs, the beautiful environments, and the solid gameplay do make the game to be worth your while. If only the story could be better structured, I would probably like it more. There's so much untapped potential on it. Thankfully, the game provides a more relaxing, Souls-like experience for everyone. It might be disappointing to some of you, but for others, this might be a nice little pick. Should you buy Code Vein? Well, if you think that Dark Souls is too damn hard for you and you want an anime Souls-like game that is more relaxing and laid back, this game is definitely for you. Get it for $60 because there are tons of content in it. I finished the game in about 22 hours and the game has multiple endings and a new game plus. If you want a pretty anime boys and girls character creator, then Code Vein is definitely for you if you're willing to pay $60. If you're in it for a good story, the game isn't for you, and I recommend buying Three Houses instead.